want to say welcome everyone to the third session of our Growing Opportunities in Canadian Agriculture webinar series, where we'll be chatting with a diverse group of individuals from the agricultural sector. Today, we are chatting with Brook from Litherland & Co., a research management firm specializing in placements with the agribusiness, agri-food, and bioproduct sectors. Looking forward to hearing more about your more unexpected role in agriculture, but also what kind of jobs that you're seeing popping up. Brook, I'll hand it over to you and let's give a bit of an introduction and kind of go over your background and work.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Nice to virtually meet everybody today. Again, my name is Brook Coatsworth. I'm the managing partner at Litherland & Company. We're an executive search firm here in Toronto that works across Canada, placing, let's just call it talent in ag. We do various levels of placements, particularly mid and senior level managers. But I know part of the conversation today is talking about entry level jobs and people coming out of school, and we do some of that work as well. A bit about myself first. I'm born and raised in Toronto. I did my undergraduate program and graduate program both in here in Ontario. Undergrad at Western, graduate school at University of Guelph. I had an opportunity to travel after my undergrad through sport. That's really where I first decided that I was going to be in agriculture. I was living in Amsterdam and commuting to and from the big city there through farm fields every day, and kind of recognized that this might be a really interesting opportunity for me to get back to Canada and work with such a great industry in our fine country. The second piece too was actually in Amsterdam. I met my first recruiter and found that experience to be quite interesting. It took about 10 years before I had an opportunity to kind of explore that thought again, but I still reflect on that first conversation I had with a recruiter at Robert Half in Amsterdam. Quite an interesting person, quite an interesting role. And so fast forward to 2016, I was living in Southwestern Ontario looking to come back to Toronto. And a good friend of mine had met Laurie Litherland, the founder of our business. He moved from Ottawa to Calgary. He moved from poultry policy to biological chemical sales, all because of Laurie. And he thought that it would be a fantastic opportunity for me to do the impossible in my mind, which was move from ag country in Southwestern Ontario back to the big city in Toronto, but get deeper into agriculture. And so as soon as I met her, rather than talking about selling some sort of pulse or specialty crop or soybeans or wheat in some tower in downtown Toronto around the world, I decided that I would perhaps pitch myself to work for her. That was in 2016, 2018. I took over the business from her and have having a lot of fun managing it ever since. Just to give you a sense of kind of what we do, we get hired by agribusinesses across Canada and focus on emerging leader recruiting within, as well as different ag associations, anywhere from soybeans and asparagus here in Ontario to wheat and canola in Western Canada. We've done leadership roles within the association space, but most of our work is with agribusinesses. We also do some human capital consulting. And what I mean by that is, over the years, 30 plus years of being in the recruiting world in agriculture, we've got quite a network, and we get relied on for our network for short-term consultancy, project-based work, where clients of ours are looking to make an impact, bring a new product in, enter a new market, and they lean on us to connect with the experts that we know. So yeah, again, small business, nimble business here in Toronto. We've been operating for 30 years and have partnerships with, most of the agribusinesses over the last 30 years I think we've worked with, but typically we'll be working with 5 or 6 firms at any given time, and certainly enjoy deep partnerships with those firms and help them build teams and build culture around their people.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. So as you know, I've followed you now for quite a while on LinkedIn after we had our first conversation a while back when you were filling a role. I think it was for the Potato Council at that time. But anyways, now I'm constantly seeing different opportunities popping up for work in agriculture. So what would you say are the most prevalent jobs popping up kind of in your sphere right now?
Yeah, great question. I would say retail sales jobs, retail operations jobs. It's an interesting dynamic when you get on the ground in the crop inputs world, the services and products that farmers rely on to grow their crops. The retail environment, both in Western Canada and Eastern Canada, is always looking for new talent. Here in Ontario, I think it's an even bigger problem than what they're having in Western Canada. But getting down onto the ground, meeting producers, learning operations that may mean doing inventory, running a forklift, running the front counter. You really get the breadth of experience, and it's a great starting point for most people. And thankfully, there are a lot of jobs out there. However, they are in more rural locations across Canada. So if you're living in a big city, it's kind of hard to service the territory. But yeah, retail sales jobs are definitely the best place, I think, to find work right now, as well as with the banks. The more rural you get, the more opportunity there is for a job. And if the field isn't necessarily for you, one of the big Schedule I institutions, CIBC, BMO, TD, they have rural branches. They're looking for ag specialists, much more of a desk job, but there's still that connection to farmers as well.
Very interesting. I definitely personally don't always think about banks, when I'm thinking in agriculture, but you see that more and more popping up, that the importance of that, especially, people needing that financial support when crops aren't going the way they want it to, or when they want to expand, or those innovative ideas. So that's great. Thanks. In terms of applicants, what backgrounds are you seeing in the most competitive applicants that you're kind of getting in?
Yeah, another great question. And it's, we talk about this when we speak at universities. University of Guelph is where I like to go back the most, the Ontario Agricultural College. I did my master's there. I graduated, had no idea how to find a job. So I enjoy going back and speaking to that master's class and going in front of some undergrads as well, and giving them a sense of what you need to succeed and to compete when you're, sending resumes out into the abyss. And I would say the biggest thing is a foundation. So your summers, if you're an undergrad or in college, any time you have off, any type of internship, if you're on a farm, or even better, make sure that your resume speaks to that. Don't discount it just because you're working for your parents or uncles and aunts. It's huge if you want to get a job in agriculture. The crops you've worked with, the equipment you've worked with. Can you attach a sprayer? I mean, that was always a question that we would ask people coming fresh out of school. That in itself can kind of showcase a little bit of a competitiveness against other people that you might be out there competing with when you are submitting resumes. But I really think that the tone you set coming out of school in your first job is really where your reputation is going to get built. It's a small industry, people talk, people know each other. And so if you get a reputation of being hardworking, people are watching, they're listening, they're going to start coming to you. And I really think that maturity is a big thing that companies, hiring managers are looking for, HR managers as well, but they're doing a little less networking than the actual hiring managers are at trade shows. So it's that hard work, kind of determination, and maturity. If you can showcase the maturity, they can see you as someone who's looking to learn, who's eager. And a lot of companies these days are pretty happy to kind of bring you on and test you out. I think the big challenge that they have is if they're investing in their employees, they're always going to be a little bit scared you might leave them, especially if they put some time and some money into you. So I always suggest to people, when you're interviewing, getting to know a hiring manager before an offer is made, or certainly before you accept it, and you've outcompeted everybody else essentially, have a good idea what those first 2 years are going to look like. Because I think in agriculture, sticking it out for the first 2 years in a job, if you see some growth, if you are happy with who your manager is, you're going to get 2 cycles of activity, 2 growing seasons essentially. And that's going to set you apart further as you look for your next job.
Great. Now I know generally, like you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the roles that you're hiring for, or you specialize in, are the more executive roles, not so much what we call, in terms of national occupational standards, which we reference at CARC here as a worker level employee, or entry level type job. But what's your take on willingness for companies to actually bring in students, bring in and have that support for work integrated learning? Is it people more supportive, lack of interest, or is it maybe just not lack of understanding of those options available. Yeah, just curious to see your take on that.
Yeah, so I've got a few different perspectives on that because ultimately what we're seeing is a shift in some of the agribusinesses out there started by some of the larger multinationals where we're seeing more internships, we're seeing more management trainee programs, essentially more opportunities for these big firms to get in front of the talent pool and to offer them jobs where there's a bit of a structure in place. For example, we know one firm that has a fantastic management trainee program where you start where you are, 6 months on the job, sales, marketing, operations, whatever you've applied to, that's where the job begins. And presumably that's what you want to do. But then they test you and they'll move you to rural Saskatchewan. They'll move you to rural Manitoba, somewhere where you don't necessarily want to be, but you're going to get an opportunity to see more of the industry, more of Canadian agriculture. Out of school, what a great opportunity. You don't have too many priorities. Your roots aren't too planted at that point. And these companies recognize that and are taking advantage of it ultimately, but by giving you great work. And we're seeing that start to trickle down, where even companies at the ground level in the crop sector or in the livestock sector at the retail level who have a very local group of producers they work with are also starting to offer internship programs. So they see the value in attracting young people fresh out of school. The pay is not the greatest, but the opportunity is really the value that you're going to get in return. Again, 2 years in at a retail job, you're set up for the next 5 years easily in your career. There's money as well, subsidies available to some of these companies if they do the right research, find the right opportunities. But I think the real barrier, Kelsey, that you kind of hinted on there was access to information. Not all these companies know about this tactic, whether it's an internship program and what that can do, or if you have an internship program, going after some subsidies to subsidize some of that labor that you bring on, that talent that you bring on to help you on the field, working with producers where you're providing that value to the employees who are starting their careers in ag, but then they're also able to hire people to do some of the tougher work, some of the operational work, inventory work, warehouse work, shoveling in fert sheds, right? There's a lot of work, laborious work that goes on in agriculture. It's a tough industry. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, I think interest is high. Knowledge is the big question mark of how do we get those people? Where do we find them? They're all at the job fairs. They're all hosting events around job fairs as well. So if you're job searching right now, if you're a student, make sure you're tapped into the resources you have at your schools. Know when the job fairs are, know when there's networking opportunities. They'll often be clumped together, and recognize that there's a real opportunity for you to get in front of employers as yourself. And again, showcase that determination. Come prepared, show some maturity. It's amazing where those conversations can go versus just submitting a resume.
Yeah, and I think that's too, part of what it's been so interesting being here at Park is, people just not necessarily even knowing about Park, and that's what you kind of touched on there is so strongly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get in touch with those post-secondary institutes, get in touch with those employers and those different, commodity associations so they're aware of, wage subsidies available and to be able to get students and get people in using things like our growing opportunities programs. So that's great. We'll definitely keep doing our best on our end to get that information out there to help everyone get solid opportunities and solid employees for that. So that's great. And as a last kind of question for right now is, do you have any final advice that you would give to our students who have joined us here today for, getting jobs in agriculture or even different mindsets to go in? I know you touched on some of this already, but I'll give you one last opportunity to add anything else on.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got a couple different ways that I want to answer that question. One in particular, what I'll end on is what I give everyone advice, and I'll get to that. But first, your network, the people around you. I think it's critical to recognize that your classmates, your teachers, institutions that are connected to the schools that you're at, see that as your network. You don't want to abuse your network. You want to use your network. You want to tap into it. One of the worst examples I've ever seen of tapping into a network, years ago, I worked at the Ivy Business School in London,. And fantastic reputation, business school, blah blah blah. Every day I heard students in the hallways competing and bragging about the opportunities and jobs they were going to get. Meanwhile, the teachers in the classrooms in their offices were so well connected into industry, and no one approached them. It was very rare that a student would come to a professor after class and have a conversation and talk about their background and learn about them. Teachers loved that. Those professors and the administrators within institutions, academic institutions, are so well connected. That's the first place you should start. The other place you can't forget about is students in your class, because while so and so to left and right in your econ class may not be able to help you get a job today, 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years from now, you may bump into them. You may reconnect with them. You may never lose touch with them. And those people can help you find work down the road. I like to think of careers as a journey. It's not a static step-by-step process. People talk about career ladders. I think that isolates you within a business. I think look at your career as a journey, and you have a more open-minded sense of what you're going to be able to accomplish on that journey and where you're going to go. Um, a piece of advice that I have is when you're starting your job search, um, look at it from a top-down process. So what I like to say with that is industry, company, people, jobs. If you've been applying for jobs, you're starting at the bottom and you're looking up. And so the difference is if you're just applying to a jobs, you're at the bottom, you're at a job title, and you're firing your resumes out, into the abyss on LinkedIn, on Indeed, whatever job board you're using. You're literally just sending it out there. You have no idea why the job is posted. You have no idea if they're even going to hire anybody from that job posting. But if you flip your process upside down and start with an industry, obviously this conversation is about agriculture, so ag industry, start looking at different companies, different sectors, different areas that you're interested, and start finding some interesting places that you might want to work. From there, look at the people. Again, you're networking, a little different. These aren't your classmates, they're not your teachers, but they're people. And if you can find some similar interests, similar backgrounds, maybe you meet these people at a job fair, there's opportunities for you to meet these people again within companies. You can start learning about the jobs. So that top-down approach is less daunting. It's more effective, and it leads to more opportunities in my mind by the time you get to the ground floor, which is an actual job title, right? And then finally, my main piece of advice that I give everybody when you think about when you're out there networking and who you are, um, and you're on this journey, it can be epic and it's like a movie, as you know, cheesy as that sounds. But what I mean by it, to build on that analogy, you've got LinkedIn accounts, you've got a resume, and you want to get an interview. So think of your LinkedIn account like your movie poster. It wants to give just enough information that people are interested. They look at it and say, "Oh, wow, this looks interesting. I want to read the resume." Resume is like your movie trailer. It's that extended look. It's more dynamic. There's a lot going on, but it leaves the audience wanting more. Just enough information to get someone excited, but want them in the gate buying that ticket, which is the interview. So again, use that movie analogy. You're the movie, you're on this journey. LinkedIn is your movie poster. Your resume is the movie trailer, and the interview is the full-length feature. So you want to draw someone from your LinkedIn to your resume to an interview and really get to know you, where you're going to show who you are, and hopefully get that job.
Great. That's some wonderful advice to be able to have, and even that stuff applies for once you're out of school, right? Once you're finding a job, that's all valuable information to be able to have, no matter at what point you're at in your career. So thank you very much. Now I will open the floor. If anyone has any questions, we have a Q&A chat feature on here, or you can just enter in the chat box anything that you might want to ask about, anything you've heard from today about the Growing Opportunities program available here at CART. Feel free to throw them in the question box there. And perhaps while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I was going to ask you, you kind of touched on already, the importance of networking. Do you feel as though it's more challenging now in some ways to get jobs because so much is done kind of online, and some things are less kind of face to face, or in attempts to network. It can be hard to actually get that contact information for people at times, depending on where you're going, that kind of thing.
Yeah, good question. So, if you asked me this question in May of 2020, my answer would totally be different than what it is today. So in May 2020, the world went virtual. For about a month, all of our searches paused. We had no idea what was going on. We isolated, and then we regrouped. And very quickly, we realized that there were going to be a lot more virtual hiring processes. But would there be a third and final interview or a fourth interview that was in person? The answer then was absolutely. We can't just do virtual. Fast forward about 6 months, we were doing fully virtual hiring processes. I think there's something to be said about the virtual world in a hiring platform that draws a lot of similarities to a virtual world in agriculture, because ag is very diverse and spread out across the country. And so you're not often meeting your team on a regular basis. So there's a certain level of maturity and communication you can show virtually that suggests that A, we can connect and collaborate, and B, perhaps you can be in front of farmers or in front of retailers, giving a webinar on a product, launching something new into the market. And if you can launch yourself into, our virtual office, then perhaps we can hire you. So I feel like the tides have turned a little bit. Now we're getting a little bit more sort of in-person mandatory as part of a hiring process, but we still do a lot of virtual interviews, and it's certainly a good first conversation. It allows firms to see more people than they may have ordinarily.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of tying into that, because we got into a little bit about like the interview process there. Someone was wondering if they get more about your view on cover letters and their content. So, I think you kind of spoke to being able to present your professionalism and that kind of thing. That probably ties into that. So I'll let you give your take on it.
Yeah, great question. So my general suggestion is twofold. One, if a company asks for a cover letter, absolutely. If they don't ask for a cover letter, then that's up to you. My suggestion is don't do one. Unless you've got a story to tell, cover letter is not necessary. Your resume should speak to everything that's in the cover letter. And I find often cover letters, when they're not necessarily, can hurt you more than they can help you, because they do drag on. It's a lot of prose. It's a lot of talking about how great you can be. And it's very hard to assess the accuracy. So it's, to a degree, a waste of time. On the flip side of that, if they do ask for it, here's what I suggest. You keep it simple. You've got a paragraph, an intro, who you are, a one-liner, which essentially says why I'm qualified for this job, and then you have bullet points. And those bullet points should speak to the accountabilities and responsibilities in the job description, so that a person or a computer can take your cover letter and their job description and pair the two. If someone is asking for a cover letter, they're probably using a technology that's going to do that. And so at that point, what you write in a cover letter is very important. But if you're doing long-winded paragraphs and prose, the machine is not going to be able to pick it up as much or as well as a human would be. So bullet points that align with the job description, that's the way to do a cover letter. And then a final paragraph kind of reiterating why you're interested in the opportunity. And that's it. Keep it simple.
Okay, so in comparison, someone actually also asked about kind of guidance on resumes as well, because you made reference there when you're talking about your cover letter to include those bullet points. I imagine you wouldn't want to see duplicates between your cover letter and like copying and pasting kind of from resume into cover letter. So how would those two vary, and what recommendations could you give on resume?
Yeah, so I mean, again, your resume is like your movie trailer. You want to give enough information that people still have some questions. They want to get to know you further. Um, I think that they are really, really, really important to draw out the simplicity of who you are, what you've done, how you've done it, who you did it with. And in agriculture, what's even more important is where you did it. So people want to understand, what territories have you been, i.e., what farms have you potentially worked with? Who have you worked with, i.e., what farmers have you worked with, and who have you collaborated within your organization to work with those farmers? And then the rest kind of fills in itself, but the who, what, why, where, when stands true, I think, in terms of what really needs to be driving a resume. And if you're in sales, you need to get some objective data in there. So when you're thinking about a territory, how many products you sold, what those products are, what crops they are being applied to, and what was your sales? How were you measured? By hitting the budget? What was it? By hitting sales targets? What was that revenue? So there's a lot of good information you can get in there. When it comes to replicating a cover letter and a resume, I think the cover letter needs to speak to a job description. There needs to be that alignment if you're doing it. And then in the middle, you've got your resume. And the resume really needs to focus on who you are, what you've done, when, where, and how, essentially, right? How effective were you? How accomplished are you? And if you're not able to put in numbers, don't talk about how great you are.
You want that quantitative quality, not just that qualitative aspect.
Yeah.
So another question came in here was how international graduates can get jobs in Canada. I imagine there's different barriers in place. I'm not sure. Do you have much familiarity with, with gathering candidates, like with kind of that international education, might not be as well known here, how they can, help them get jobs here?
Yeah. So I'll answer it in two ways. One, we have moved people internationally. There are only so many experts in Canada in various agriculture sectors or areas of expertise. For example, the most recent person we moved from South America to Canada was a potato expert. And they had a specific knowledge around potato production where there were only, let's just say, half a dozen people in Canada that could do the job. And all those 6 people were very well employed and not looking to make a move. But this company needed someone. And so they have experience going through the labor market opinion process and essentially bringing an expert from overseas to Canada for work. If you're here already and you've got education and you're looking for work, that's a completely different story. It's a little harder because unless you have some sort of expertise that is needed here and there's not enough people to supply that expertise, then you're competing against lots of people. And if you're looking for entry-level positions, it really depends on your territory, it depends on your experience, and it depends on how you approach the hiring process. So there's lots of job boards out there, Ag Careers, Indeed, LinkedIn, are the 3 main ones that we will use and advertise our postings on beyond our website, of course. But companies have job boards. Companies also have opportunities to be at job fairs. We talked a bit about that. I know that there are organizations like Ag Careers that are hosting international students to meet employers and sort of touring and doing some networking. So there's lots of good companies out there that are looking for international students, but it's about the fit. And just because you've worked in whatever country in agriculture doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a one-to-one fit here in Canada. If you can find an opportunity that's going to get you in front of producers, build on it. Whatever that is, that's the role that you need to take, whether it's in a warehouse, in a fert shed, in a feed mill. There's lots of work out there that are companies that have gaps that need people to fill them. And so if you've done 10 years of sales and crop inputs overseas and you come here looking for that role, it's going to be hard to find. And so finding your foot in the door somewhere in a more laborious job, operations, retail operations, is going to be a good first step. Now, if you have great experience, we've seen it many times where you're, more a mid-level manager, product management, marketing management, and you have worked in wheat or soy or some crop that's grown here in Canada, you're going to find a lot more opportunities are coming to you than if you're looking for a frontline sales job, for example.
Yeah, this kind of ties in a bit to actually another little note here that someone wrote in, is that they have a doctorate degree in horticulture. They're finding that most jobs related to the field are kind of that general labor, like you mentioned there. They're wondering if it's worth joining as a laborer, even though they have the PhD, they have that specialized knowledge, or is there perhaps different ways that they can figure out to get into their more specialized field? I know that you hire at times specialists and people who are a little bit more advanced in their education and understanding of agriculture. So perhaps you.
Yeah. Good question. I mean, for any PhD out there, you're an expert in a certain field. So horticulture, for this example. The first question you got to ask yourself is how in demand is my PhD in horticulture and who's using it, right? In horticulture, there's Vineland that does horticulture research. University of Guelph does horticulture research. There's not many institutions that are going to be doing research. It's more applied. It's more working with farms that are growing horticultural products, fruits and vegetables, greenhouses, obviously massive. But when you start to look at that industry, especially here in Ontario, where it is quite large, Ontario and Quebec, a lot of the operations are still fairly small. They're fairly family owned. And the family is in all the fun jobs, the sales jobs, the management jobs, the operations jobs. We've been hired over the last 5 years by a few greenhouses to bring in outside expertise. So I see a shift happening. But if you can get your foot in the door with a company that is supporting, this is for the PhD out there, that's supporting greenhouses in some sort of scientific way, and your PhD has some alignment to what the products they're selling, and you can translate complex product information into easily digestible, practical information, that's probably the best fit for you. If it takes getting a labor job to work for a great company, for sure. And that's why I go back to that top-down approach. Don't look at yourself as a PhD looking for big science jobs, or all you're going to do is settle for operations jobs. Look for a company who really embodies the work that you did, who is looking for scientists or looking for someone to share ideas where you can use your PhD. Maybe by the time you go top down and you're at the bottom, all that's there is an operation intern, but at least you know that company once they're hired, or they've hired you, sorry, there's gonna be more value you can add to them down the road.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about getting your foot in the door, like you said, right? Getting that
Mhm.
that first connection made to be able to build up and further to get into the more specialized particular role that you're truly wanting to get at.
Exactly. And that's why I say company first, industry, company, people, and then jobs. If you can understand the business, understand their people, you're gonna have a better opportunity to network your way in there so that when they do look at your CV, they may know who you are already.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end of our 30 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone, to your questions. Thank you so much, Brooke, for joining us in here. It's been a really
You're
good
welcome.
conversation, and I really appreciate everyone's contributions today. I think everyone will be able to learn a little bit about all the different questions asked here. I see some more questions coming in specifically about cover letters, resumes, and that kind of thing. I highly recommend that if you are in your post-secondary institutes, that you reach out to your career center. A lot of them have advice and offerings kind of around how to develop your resume or have workshops and that kind of thing. So hopefully, those institutes can help you. I think at times you don't necessarily need to be a part of the institutes to be able to reap some of those benefits. So definitely check it out. In terms of opportunities for work integrated learning and that kind of thing, definitely feel free to check over CARC, our website. We have a lot of different information around different webinars for newcomers to Canada, Indigenous focus, a lot of different elements that might be able to provide some value to some of the people who joined in on here today. So again, thank you so much, everyone. I had a great time chatting with you all, and hope you have a wonderful day.